Something's got to be done about this. Railing is rotting. The floor is bouncy. Not good to have a bouncy floor. Not the kind of floor you want. So there's some problems here. And it just doesn't look good. I mean, okay, it lasted 100 years. Not bad. Way to go, whoever built this. I'm sure there's structural problems that, you can only... Well, we don't want to find out about them the hard way. Step one is remove the old floor. I already removed the membrane on top and a layer of plywood underneath. Now I'm pulling up these floor planks. Check this out. There is, let me get out of the sun. There is yet, underneath this membrane, this underlayment under this floor, there's what looks like another floor. What is going on here? This is like, it's like balcony inception. All right, let's go deeper. Figure out what's under there. So it's kind of amazing how nice this floor looks underneath all this stuff. I'm still kind of ripping it up, but I thought this was interesting. Found this piece of wood. It says standard railroad container. I mean, this wood was it taken from a barrel or something? Who knows? I've been pretty impressed with the quality of materials and craftsmanship with the rest of this house, but this balcony is really not in great shape. I don't know what they built around. The sort of surrounding looks good, but the kind of middle part, the part that matters, is in really bad shape. So anyway, we're gonna keep cleaning this up and figure out what's going on here. So check this out. That looks a lot like charred wood. These little pieces. There's this ugly looking piece of, charred, rotten, I don't know what kind of wood. But then there's this nice brand new kind of, looks like a 2x10 or something on the side. Looks like something happened to this balcony and they built a new one around it. At some point. I don't know when. 50 years ago? Who knows? Maybe we'll learn more as we take more apart, but this floor looks actually it looks kind of nice, doesn't it? Looks like pretty decent floor. A couple holes in it, although this looks like maybe it was burnt also. I don't know. We're gonna figure out what happened. This is super interesting. So yeah, I'm just pulling up these floorboards one by one. I was using this little crowbar, or this little pry bar up until now,
my neighbor saw me hacking away at it and brought over this bigger crowbar, so things are going a lot faster now.
Alright, we've reached the halfway point, as we're going to install some tension ties on the side here. We have quite a bit of additional load budget that we gained from removing all that kind of dead weight, these floors that weren't being used. So this will all get tied together once we put OSB down, in the same way the floor did. But we can double up a couple of these beams.
In order to fix that corner that was kind of rotted out, I need to cut out a specially shaped piece of wood here. This is a 2x6, and each of the corners and all along the side of the balcony there's these little chunks of 2x6s with little notches cut out that attach the center frame to the sort of surrounding frame. The piece that was in there is just, it melted away when I touched it. It was just totally rotted. So cutting out a couple pieces to put in there, I'll attach it to the frame, attach it to the corner, and then I'll use some angle iron to tie it back to the rest of the frame.
Need to frame that up, attach everything, cut a slit here, and this will go to the top, connect everything, and then I'll sister this rotted piece with another 2x6, connect everything at the corner. We should be good. We're done with this side. I put a tension tie on the side here, and you can see there's a new bolt going into the wall. Filled it in with mortar, push the bolt in, let it dry, and then tighten this tension plate against it. That's attached to this beam. Put an angle iron on the top corner of the beam. It doesn't really strengthen the beam a whole lot, but it does tie this corner in. So we want to connect this corner as much back to the side here as we can. And I have another angle iron going on the side here. Again, it doesn't provide strength to these joists, to this joist and this beam, but it will help connect this corner back to where the support system is. This joist is sistered, and I cut out little, you can see I cut out a little triangle there. Again, that's just to provide continuity and hold in this corner. I've cut out another little piece here to fill in that spot where there was rot. So this, at the very corner, there's a little piece of wood that I cut out in the shape of an L and that ties directly down into the column underneath it. So this has vertical support, and then these angle irons provide lateral support to the corner. It ties everything together. I feel pretty good about this new corner. It's at the very least it's way better than it was, and it seemed to be holding together fine before. So I'm pretty happy about this. And now this means we can pull up the rest of this flashing, which has been really tough. This is like load-bearing flashing somehow. That's a joke. But yeah, I can start putting floor here. This is pretty exciting.
If you remember that little block I had to make for the far corner, I'm making them for all the corners, but for a different reason. The posts I'm going to install over each of the columns is 4x4, and these are 2x6s. So I'm going to be pairing them up side by side to give a firm 4x4 sized base for each of the vertical posts for the railing and in the back for the pergola. The next step, before I put the floor structure in, I'm actually mounting all 7 posts, and that will inform how the floor joists are lined up. These aren't real floor joists, they're 2x4s, and they're going to float on top of the existing frame, but they will serve as a good base for the OSB that will go on top. They'll float a bit above and raise up the floor a little bit because we had those 2 layers of flooring that was on there before. And by resting sort of facing vertically, they'll be sandwiched around all of the posts, providing more support and structure for the posts. These posts can't really stand on their own, so the posts will be bolted directly into the floor structure, providing support for the posts and connecting the floor structure down into the column supports that are underneath the balcony. So goal is to tie everything together so that everything is supporting everything else and the load is evenly distributed. I'm using carriage bolts. I think these are 8 inches, maybe 10. And they're just going to go all the way through both of the floor joists, through the post and outside the other one. And this is going to give us a good anchoring effect to attach the floor to the post to the column. I have 2 more sort of, they're like little Z-shaped brackets. They're going to wrap around. There's another bolt that's going to go through the side here. This corner bracket is doing a good job. It's pulling the post inward a little bit toward the house, which is good because the main force we want to resist against is pushing it outwards. So once I get these other brackets in, it'll straighten it out, but with a tension toward the inside. But yeah, this is pretty sturdy even with nothing really bolted in. Just need to connect these 2 new joists to the beams underneath, and we'll start putting lay the rest of these and then start putting plywood over. Here I'm laying down the floor. I get the opportunity here to make sure that the floor is angled in the direction and slope that I want it to be, because this is a balcony, but it's also a roof. So we're essentially roofing here. One thing I would probably do differently is these little pieces I'm putting in to connect the long joists. I should have measured out this a little more thoroughly because it's important that the plywood ends line up with these things. So I put them a little haphazardly. But if you're doing this, I wouldn't do it this way. Here's another tension tie I'm installing in the center of the floor. I have this one installed with a sleeve anchor. So you just sort of drill a hole in your mortar joint, hammer this thing in, and then tighten it, and it expands. These things are good for like 2,000 pounds. Building code has, I think it wants 750 pounds of pull-out force per tension tie, at least in my area. So honestly, I don't actually need to install these because the floor is already cantilevered through the wall. But while I have everything apart, I might as well install them, right? Doesn't hurt. We do get hurricanes in this area, and we do get high winds, so.
Alright, we've got our wall brace in here. This is actually a regular post base tied into a sleeve anchor. So when we put our post here, and this is up about, I don't know, 3 feet, and I'm going to put another one up a little higher. That will give us, that will allow us to true the post, having these each the same width coming out of the wall, and it'll provide some support to the post. So I'm going to put in one more of these, and then we'll get this corner post installed. Then, once we get this center post in, we can actually start putting the floor on. So, that's pretty exciting.
Okay, finally got the sleeve on. I didn't go into the details of everything there because it's hard to capture in a video, and it's kind of boring and tedious. So, but I did get it on. All the posts are going to be this color, and now I just need to anchor it to the wall, and I'll use the same strategy for the other post on the other side, which will also be anchored to the wall. So I use approximately the same strategy here as I used for the front post, where I'm kind of sandwiching it between two of these floor joists. I have a carriage bolt going through 2 Z brackets, and now I'm just tightening it in. I'm installing some trim around the edges. The old trim was not in great shape. It was rotted, and since I'm raising the overall floor up a little bit, I need to raise the trim up as well so that the slope around the edges isn't so steep when it goes to install the OSB. And this new trim will give something more substantial to the OSB, to the screws through the OSB to kind of grab onto. I follow the glue and screw method for installing OSB, so I do put construction glue around everything, which means if I ever need to remove this, I'm going to have a hell of a time getting it off, but the construction glue will keep the OSB from moving around and squeaking quite as much. After I put the glue down, it dries pretty quick, so I put the OSB down immediately and start fastening it in. I'm just using normal kind of wide head deck screws. You can use the ones with the fat washers on top, but I'm not convinced that's necessary if you've got construction glue down. I'm spacing the screws 6 inches around the edges and 12 inches on the interior. You can see that 2 of the pieces of the edge there are not lined up with joist support, And this is the thing that I was mentioning earlier with my haphazard flooring layout here. You really don't want that situation where you've got a edge of the OSB that's not supported. So do not do this if you're laying down floor. But also, I'm putting decking over top of this, so it's not going to matter in the end, but it's not a best practice either. The corner, which has a notch in the corner to allow for the post, and I am using OSB spacers. I got these from Simpson, and you want to have about 1/8 of an inch of space between each of your OSB panels because they expand and contract with weather and moisture and humidity and so forth. So I got these spacers because it guarantees a consistent gap between the panels, and it helps me kind of secure the panels in place prior to screwing them down. So you can see in this case, as I'm putting this in, the slope is down toward the edge. So this is going to be important because you do not want water. You want every part of your surface to be convex. So any place that water lands, you want it to go somewhere. You don't want it to roll back into any local cavity in your surface. This is sort of the roofing aspect here. And it's angled nicely down toward the edge, and so even without flashing or gutters or anything, it's going to do a good job at shedding water off of it. And now I finish off this corner by cutting out a little piece to be fitted into this gap here. Luckily, OSB is pretty easy to cut. I'm using 7/16 inch thickness. If you want to actually walk directly on the surface, you'll want to use probably a 1/2 inch or thicker. And I'm wrapping up this half of the balcony floor. And you can see it's quite a bit higher than the half I haven't done yet. I also want to point out you can now see those Z brackets that I mentioned for the railing posts. Those are holding everything in nicely. And I also put some angle brackets to secure the new 2x4 floor joists into the existing framing. This also helps me calibrate the correct slope for the floor, because these 2x4s are floating above the existing frame somewhat, and this, by securing them to it, it ensures that the slope doesn't change over time due to expansion and shrinkage and warping and whatnot, and it helps tie everything together. And now that I've got all the OSB down, I'm installing this flashing tape on all of the seams between the OSB. So I'm doing the second half in much the same way I did the first half, which means I made the same mistake on the layout of the frame that I made on the left side, but overall it worked out fine. Again, no one's walking directly on the OSB, but if someone is walking directly on that subfloor and you only have the membrane on top of it, you want to line up the supports with the edges of the OSB. Otherwise, over time, people stepping on those edges will weaken it. Other than that, everything's basically the same. Overall, this floor is going to be way stronger than it was. Not only did we get rid of rot, but we have a second layer of light framing that's connected into the original frame, and that's going to tie everything together, distribute load better, and strengthen the overall structure. Another interesting thing is that because the back posts are going to be tied directly into the brick wall. And I have a solid brick house. This isn't some brick veneer that would pull out in a storm. So everything's going to be tied together, tied to the house, and tied to the columns underneath. So it's going to be very strong. All right, we finally finished ripping up the balcony. There was a lot of stuff in there. This is the pile. I've been throwing it off the balcony and dragging the stuff over here. This is a really big pile.